I don't usually get music when I come up, so that's pretty exciting. So, are we fired up, Steelworkers? Are we fired up? Are you motivated? You learning good stuff? Well, I'm excited to be here, and I'll try not to yell too much, but it's really important to me to be here because my very first union activity was going down to a strike line in Metropolis, Illinois, when Honeywell shut out workers a few years back when I first got in the union. It was the first sign of solidarity I had, and I hold that very dear. I want to personally thank every single person in this room for being here today. You know, a lot of people talk about patriotism and freedom in America, but I believe that exercising your individual freedoms, to join a union, to be involved, and then to support your fellow workers deserves a big round of applause. So thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm not going to give you just a normal presentation. This is a little different. I'm going to tell you a story about myself. I'm hoping that you can relate to some of that. And then I'm going to show you how I use my story to build national programs and change people's lives. But first, we've got to organize, right? How many organizers in this room? Everybody raise your hand. You're all an organizer. Every single one of you. So pull out your cell phones. Who's on social media? I'm guessing there's a bunch. I was at the Electricians Renew program a few weeks ago, and they signed up 200 people to my Facebook page. I'm going to be keeping notes, and we're going to see if you guys can beat the IBEW, so I hope you can. To get serious, though, being in a union is really important. It's important to me. I think it's important to everybody in this room. And not always do we think about how important it is. We get a paycheck on Friday. We go to a meeting once in a while. But we never really know. I don't think we pay attention enough. So I'm going to play a video, and I want you to think about what being in a union means to you. What word comes to mind while we play this video? Before we go any further, if you feel comfortable, if you're a veteran, a spouse of a veteran, or a parent of a veteran, please stand up. Please stand up. I want to see how many we have in the room. Look at that, brothers and sisters. Thank you for your service. Thank you all for your service very much. And we got to remember that for every veteran, there's a family, and they're just as important. We got to remember that every single time we talk about veterans. As I said, my name's Will Attig. I'm the executive director of the Union Veterans Council at the National AFL-CIO. I'm a proud journeyman pipe fitter from a small local in southern Illinois, and I'm a combat infantryman. Spent many years deployed. My journey to get here is different than some, in my opinion, but very similar in many ways. See, I came from a very poor town in southern Illinois. And from that poor town, I was a really poor family. I was the kind of family that had to rely on coats for kids and toys for tots for Christmas presents. I'm guessing there's some people in this room that live that way. And in today's society, that doesn't give you a lot of dignity and respect. We live in a world where people value things much more than what the people are. They value what kind of clothes you wear, what kind of car you drive. And growing up, that was hard. You know, I played sports, but my mom could never pay for my wrestling shoes. She couldn't pay for my summer classes or travel ball. That wasn't easy. I was a good athlete. People always ask me, why can't you go to that tournament? We just couldn't do it. We were the kind of family that just got 1 or 2 pairs of shoes a year. I mean, that's what the reality in America is. There's tons of people living that way. And I was just one of many. And with that, you get that stigma. You're that poor kid from down the street. You know, you can't take people out to dates. It's tough. It's tough to live that life. But things change. I joined the military when I was 18 years old in 2003. I didn't do it because I had to. I did it because I had a calling. I wanted to do a little bit more for myself. I wanted to be more than that kid on the back end of the street. So I put a uniform on. And I stood a little bit taller. I got a little respect. They sent me to school and taught me how to be an infantryman. I got a little bit more. I felt got a little stretched out a little bit more in that uniform. By the time I went through basic training, 4 months later I found myself with tens of thousands of other young men and women just like myself, on a convoy from Kuwait to Iraq, to Baghdad, then to Samarra, about 6 months after the war started. It was a bunch of young men and women that just wanted to serve their country. We didn't know what we were getting into at that time, but we wanted to do it. Throughout my military career, I grew and learned. There's so much responsibility we put on our young soldiers. We see them in pictures, and everyone says, thank you for your service, but they don't really know what goes into it. By the time I was 22 years old, I was leaving a fire team. That meant I was in charge of 5 people's lives, not only in combat, but back home. That's a lot of responsibility for a 22-year-old. That's a lot of life lessons that you don't get many other places. By the time I was 25, I think it was, I became a squad leader. Now, being a squad leader means that not only do you have to take care of your soldiers, you've got 2 NCOs that you're telling to delegate management skills to. But being a staff sergeant, you learn a lot about finances and economics and all kinds of things that you wouldn't think soldiers know about. And that's a lot of responsibility. And when I came home then, I wasn't a poor kid anymore. I had a bunch of medals. They had a little parade for me in my hometown with 1 fire truck. It was pretty fantastic. But I wasn't that poor kid anymore. It was awesome. I was proud. I loved that uniform. But all kind of stories come to end. And I was injured and serving for our country, and I wound up leaving the military in 2009. And in 2009, I didn't know that I was going to face the worst fight I ever fought in my life. It wasn't the streets of Ramadi during the surge, but it was the streets of Southern Illinois during the recession in 2009. I came home to a system that was rigged against working class people like myself. I came home to a system that had been crashed by banks and CEOs that were greedy. And it was tough. It's not just my story. When I came home, I didn't have the right ability to talk about what I had to offer a civilian job. So I jumped from $10 an hour jobs. I dropped out of college because I struggled. I brought a big bag full of problems home with me that I didn't realize I had until I came home. And I struggled. All that dignity I had, that big uniform that I had to put in a closet, my dignity kind of just started to drop away. Every time I got turned down for a job, a little bit more. But that's the story of hundreds of thousands of veterans around this country. Right now in America, 31% of veterans make less than $31,000 a year. That is shameful. That is something that needs to be fixed. The worst day of my life, I remember it so clearly. I went to a job interview. The job was for a mid-level manager at a Pepsi distribution center. I went into that interview and I talked to the HR director for about 45 minutes. He wanted to hear all my war stories. He wanted to hear about all the cool stuff I said. And I thought I had this job in the bag. This job was going to pay me $13 an hour with a few benefits. It was going to change my life. Change my life from where I was at that time. I was at the lowest point of my life. As I got to the end of that interview, the HR director asked me one question. He said, "Where's your college degree at?" And I kind of looked at him, kind of dumbfounded. I said, I just got done telling you, I spent the last 7 years of my life doing multiple deployments, leadership schools. I didn't have time for night school. But he had a policy that you had to have a degree to be a manager. And I didn't have the tools inside of me to be able to fight and explain that I was worthy of that job. And I had to leave. I left that job and I just cried the entire way home. I had to borrow the money to go to that job interview. The worst day of my life. All that dignity was just stripped away. I think people in this room felt that way before. I think people in this room seen their parents feel that way. Because that's the reality of our economy. But brothers and sisters, there's an answer. About a week after that job interview, someone called me up and said, "Have you ever heard about helmets to hard hats?" I said, "Nope." He said, "It's a union program. It's going to teach you how to be a pipe fitter." I said, "A union? I'm not from a union family. I don't know what a union is." And they kind of went through it. They said, "You're going to have a middle-class job. You're going to be able to get retirement. You're going to be able to raise a family with dignity." I said, "Sign me up." Man, that first paycheck I got the dignity started to come back. And that's what the union does. That's what we give every single day. It's just a little bit of dignity. We don't ask for millions. We just want a little dignity in our lives. If you look at the right side of the slide, if you're a union veteran, you make on average $12,000 more than a non-union veteran. Think about that. Think about that when people talk about helping veterans out. What would $12,000 do to you to improve your life every year? Well, that's what the union does. The union gives that purpose back. So for me, being a union member is much more than just getting a paycheck. The word's dignity. The union gave me my dignity back. And that's why I'm standing here today. But I could have just sat in that welding booth, welded my pipe, got a good wage, retired, and been happy. But I crave purpose. In the military, I had purpose. When I was in played sports, I had purpose. I found the labor movement. And the labor movement gave me my purpose. Because once I joined the union, I realized they gave me something. They gave me that dignity back. I wanted to give something back. So I began to advocate for veterans. I started to volunteer with my local, and I realized that if I volunteered more, I got more of a voice. I started to be an activist. I started to show up to knock on doors, make phone calls, go to events. That made me get to be around some people and realize that I had a voice. I wasn't just a pipe fitter. I was a union pipe fitter. I had an entire labor movement behind me. And I bought a cheap suit, and I drove up to Springfield, Illinois, and knocked on every veteran lawmaker's door, telling them I didn't know what I was going to say. I just said, we need to do something. And we started working, and somehow or another, I was a young apprentice. I didn't even have a voice in my own union. And I was passing legislation that was changing more veterans' lives just like myself. And it was amazing. And that purpose came back. So then I realized, how can you get more involved? So then I became my local union coordinator. And I'm telling you, there was older people that wanted to do it, but I just had the passion. I kicked the doors in, and I said, I'm going to be the local union coordinator. I'm going to run the program. And we did. Then I started working for the AFL-CIO part-time as a relief staff. I worked with a young steelworker. Is Jason Fernandez in the room? Jason in here somewhere? He's there, back there. We knocked a lot of doors together. We ran a lot of programs together. And we grew together, and we learned together. How many of you have worked on a labor program before? Knocked doors, engaged in political activity? Next time I come, I want to see a lot more hands. A lot more hands. But that led me to coming here today. So that big journey that I just went on, the ups, the downs, the lows, gave me the ability to become the executive director of the Union Veterans Council, representing 1.2 million veterans and another 3 million retired union veterans. And it happened because I just wanted to do it. I realized there was a need for young union members to get more involved in their local union movement, and their local labor movement. And I came to the Union Veterans Council. I wasn't going to build, and if you don't know, the AFL-CIO has programs for everybody. We have Pride at Work. We have CLUE. We have programs for any group of people that are members of unions. And it's a great ability to have that purpose again, to find out something that you care about and get more involved. That's what Veterans of Steel is. That's bringing union members together. So when I became the executive director of the Union Veterans Council, I wanted to build a program for workers, not for Washington, D.C. And we came with the goal to engage, educate, and mobilize our union veterans. And along the way, anybody who wanted to come along. But we had to have a framework. Most union programs are kind of based off of old frameworks, new frameworks. I'm not quite sure. But I wanted to make sure that the priorities that I felt that members needed were addressed. So the first thing, the most important thing I did was I began doing membership engagement. That's the key pillar to our program. The idea of bringing like-minded people together to become part of a bigger entity. The military is a really cool place. We have Marines, Army, Air Force, Navy. We've got crayons for the Marines somewhere. I don't know, that's a military joke. And I'm sure there's at least one Coast Guard in here, so I won't make the funny jokes, yeah. But the thing is, we have one mission, and that's to fight for our country. In the labor movement, we have the same idea. We have steelworkers and electricians and pipe fitters and NASA scientists. But we have one singular goal, and that's to make life better for our fellow workers. Because every time you win a contract fight at your local, that gives a little bit more power to the workers in your area. So it's bigger than just yourself. It's bigger than just that small unit that you're in. But we need to tell people. I think Liz Schuler, Secretary-Treasurer Liz Schuler, who I work with, talked about it a couple of days ago, that 64% of Americans want to be in a union. But the thing is, that many people don't know how to talk to a union and don't know what unions do. That's kind of a problem, right? If people want to be part of something but they don't know how to be in it, that's a bit of a problem. So what we need to do is make sure that we're involved in our communities. We're talking to people. We're getting in newspapers to tell them the opportunities, to tell that group of people that might be only making $10 an hour that they can join together and build power and get that dignity that they deserve. But how do you do that? How do you build power? You do it through policy and legislation. Right now, we've got a system that's rigged against workers, and that's something we need to change. So we get involved in policy. You know, a few weeks ago, I wrote a letter to Congress. I write letters to Congress all the time. And we do it for legislative letters on issues. And an issue came up where 1.3 million of the most at-risk veterans for suicide could get an improvement in their life with one bill. Think about that. One bill could improve the lives of 1.3 million veterans. Pretty good bill, right? You think it would pass it? Well, it got passed. It got passed in the House. But the thing is, we've got to have people to pass those bills. So the last part of our program, we make sure that we get involved in the political process. We make sure that we're fighting for people that are going to fight for us. Because if we don't have people fighting for us, you know, we're kind of in trouble. And it doesn't matter if you're Democrat or you're a Republican. If you're willing to stand next to me and fight for my fellow union veterans and my fellow workers, I'm going to stand right next to you. Brian Fitzpatrick is a congressman from Pennsylvania. He's a Republican. When I asked him to vote to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour to improve the lives for 1.3 million veterans who are the most at risk for suicide, because of our relationship, guess what he did? He was one of 4 Republicans that voted to improve their lives. And that's what a program can do. It's about building power, brothers and sisters. It's about building power. We build chapters all through the country, but we just don't build committees and chapters for anything. We do it with a purpose. I always say I didn't build a veterans program, I built a labor program for our veterans. So I want to introduce you to the Pittsburgh, I won't say Allegheny County, you might not know what that is, but the Pittsburgh Union Veterans Council, who's led by some young veterans here. And I'm going to show you what they've been able to do over the last year after we built our program. We came into Allegheny County during a special election to help elect a young Marine running for Congress before we really knew what we were doing. I said, can we build a program around here and start testing? And since then, after we got Connor Lamb elected, and we were a major part of that, I will say that, we started going to work. Last Christmas, our chapter partnered with the homeless shelters and folks that took care of homeless veterans to give them goods. We used that as a community outreach process. During the government shutdown, when a quarter million veterans didn't got locked out of the jobs, we were able to help them. We held job fairs, and we helped elect another pro-worker, steelworker candidate, Pam Iavino, to state legislation. So that was a really big deal. So the idea is use our programs to move and change America. Engage members, build power, elect our champions, and change policies. You think we can do that? You think you can do that with the Next Gen organization? Our young workers are primed for this because we need to do a few things. We need to fight back together. We need to make sure that there's fair wages and voter protections. We need to invest in our communities. We need to create living jobs and a fair tax structure. We can do that. But we need all of you to do that. We need you to help. So I want you to, again, like our page, follow us on Facebook, Twitter. Fight back. Get involved. Get involved in a little bit in your community at your local. Because if you give people a push, if you can give people an opportunity, they can change great things. Last week, I sat across the table from Nancy Pelosi. In a room full of every veteran organization, I was able to engage and change policy. I now get to do amazing things in Washington, D.C. In Illinois, I changed policy and legislation for veteran suicide. And guess what? I still don't have a college degree like that HR director wanted me to have. But what do I have? I have a union that backs me up. I have a labor movement that backs me up. I have every single one of you in that room to back me up. And thank you so much for it. And lastly, as I close out, I want to say one last thing. Because we thanked our veterans for their service, I believe other Americans across the country deserve thanks too. So if something applies to you, I want you to stand up. And I want you to get loud, and I want you to get motivated to go back and make change in your communities. So if you've ever fought and negotiated for a good wage for your workers, stand up. If you've ever been part of a strike to fight back, stand up. If you're involved in social and economic justice and changing the way our system, stand up. That's every single one of you. Thank you for your service. Thank you so much.